One go. Hello.
Hello.
We have begun. So yeah, what would you like to ask me, Matt, about?
Okay. When did you first realize you wanted to become a painter?
I guess when I was around
What age were you?
about 19, maybe. I guess maybe 18. So I wasn't. I mean, I was a little bit interested in some art when I was younger, but not much. More like sort of like found the ancient Egyptians interesting and some of their artwork. Obviously, that's not really contemporary art, but I thought Picasso was quite interesting. That was the main thing I was interested in when I was in high school. But I didn't really get into like painting until I was about 18, 19. I just started experimenting with drawing when I was late teens. Um, and then I got interested in painting uh, around about that time, really. Just doodling mostly, like doodling characters and doodling, I suppose, like abstract designs. I started to get into abstract art a bit as well. I think
So
Kandinsky
was
was.
it a need to become a painter? Did you need to become one, or was it just an interest?
At the time, it felt like a compulsion because I got quite obsessive
Yeah.
with it for a while. So it's sort of a compulsion, yeah. I was having some mental difficulties at the time. I got bipolar diagnosis now, and that was that was. It felt like it helped with those dealing with these weird thoughts and emotions I was having at the time. So it felt like a compulsion. And I never had that compulsion really when I was younger. I mean, I'd always been a bit creative, but it was a different expression of creativity. It's more like working on computers and stuff, and that was more my expression of creativity when I was younger, I guess. Uh, but yeah, yeah. So about 19, maybe 18 a bit as well. Late teens. Started
So would you describe yourself as an artist or a painter?
bit of both, bit of column
What I
A,
mean by that is, okay,
bit of
sorry, go ahead.
column A, yeah, bit of column A, bit of column B. So, I mean, I
A
think,
creative thinker.
yeah, I could do a bit of lots of all sorts of things like music, a bit of writing as well. I've been doing a bit more recently.
Yeah.
Prose and poetry, short story writing, painting. I've not done as much of the painting as I'd like to recently, but I had a background as a painter, game design, doing digital media and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say I'm just a painter because I
Yeah.
work in a lot of, well, I'm sort of multi-disciplinary artist, I suppose, because I work in a lot of different um, mediums as well as sound as well, music sometimes too.
That's interesting. So which artist did you first identify with?
Um, Good
If
question.
there was just one.
I
If there was
think
just one, maybe
there's a few. So I really started getting interested because I think because of an extension of just what I was doing naturally when I was a late teenager, I got quite drawn to Kandinsky actually. So the abstraction that he was doing in his images and the relationship with sounds to art and visual art and music and to visual art meant that I was quite drawn to Kandinsky actually. Then a bit later than that, Miro, all the sort of classic modernist painters, I guess, the surrealists and everything else. But one of the first artists I think I remember getting interested in was Kandinsky. Actually, yeah. My work doesn't resemble his very much at the minute, but when I was doing the experimentation, certainly Kandinsky was someone that I was drawing inspiration from. I think just because I just liked this sort of, like sort of like Paul Clay said, like taking a line for a walk. My early work was very much just experimenting with form and line and color and everything else, which is sort of how I learned how to paint. To be honest, it's just experimenting with creating. Because I have no formal background, so I had to sort of teach myself, I guess. So I sort of went the wrong way around. Really, I started off doing abstract, and then now I do more figurative artwork in general, but go back and forth really. But Yeah.
So, how would you categorize your painting? How would you define it?
Sort of, I guess it's expressionist in some sense, the way I use my mark making and the way I use paint or pen or whatever materials I'm using. There's a certain influence from psychology, so there's a certain surreal aspect to it as well. Surrealism, I suppose, has been an interesting influence. More recently in my digital work, there's been a sort of collage element, I suppose. Collaging bits of pop culture, even called art culture, so like art history. And, yeah, there's a whole mix of things in there, really. And it also depends on the medium. The medium can change sort of style, I suppose, of what I'm making, I guess. If that makes sense. Yeah.
So, is there any sort of theory underpinning any of your work, or are you just an expressionist?
There is some theory in some level, but it's not really like I don't consciously plan things out usually. I don't consciously say
Yeah.
this is the statement I'm going to make. It tends to be that I produce something and it's working from my unconscious. I don't like consciously think to myself, I'm going to make a piece of work that's about X and Y political event or whatever, or make some sort of statement. A lot of my work deals with technology and our relationship to technology. Some of it is the body, deals with the body quite a lot. So our perception of the body, a sort of um, how the body interacts with the world. Um, Also, just pure aesthetics, like the sort of beauty of the world and objects and people, I guess. So it's a mix of things, but
So,
there's not usually any explicit meaning often.
no, so when you work, it's quite instinctive. It's like an emptying and out process.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
to me
pouring out.
personally, I don't see how it can be. I mean, this is just my personal way of working, but I wouldn't find it that interesting if I knew exactly what I was going to do every time I was going to do some artwork. If I knew exactly what the end result would be, it'd get a bit stale and boring for me. I like the process of experimentation, really.
Well, exactly. I think the most important aspect of painting is the mystery of it.
Yeah,
The mystery
exactly.
of its creation, and also what it actually means. I think that's very important.
Yeah, because I think if you just regurgitate the same thing over and over again, and you knew exactly what you were going to produce, you want those happy accidents and those happy surprises. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it just becomes an exercise in repetition, which is not interesting for you, and probably not that interesting for the viewer if they're familiar with your work. If you just, I mean, obviously, there's always going to be a degree of any repetition because you have a certain style, you have a certain aesthetic which you work to, but it's about, I guess, it's all a lot of the time it's about pushing that forward as much as you can do, um, but in reason. And yeah, just that's what keeps it fresh and interesting. Is just that next boundary to try and explore, I guess.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, good painting constantly evolves. I think a trap some painters fall into is that they develop a formula that works, and then that's all they do for 30 years, and the work just becomes stale and boring.
Yeah.
Just that's it.
Well, I mean,
I think good painting constantly changes.
yeah, like it's interesting.
Modern painting.
Even with someone like abstract expressionists like Rothko, for example, where you could say that he'd sort of developed into a sort of style, but then even then he changed his mode of working quite a bit, even within his own sort of like color field painting. But then he changed it even a bit towards the later stages and even ventured even further out of field with his work. So yeah,
I, I
even
think it can reach a point with painting that sometimes you exhaust yourself. Like Bacon,
yeah.
the last 10 or 15 years of his life, he was just rehashing old imagery. I mean, he's still a great painter. I admire him greatly, but
Yeah, I mean,
he
in
was
some
just,
respects, I guess if you reach, I mean, especially if you're successful, like Bacon was somewhat in his lifetime, then you can almost become you've got to sort of always keep that level of momentum going. So I know it can be quite a curse in some ways. I guess you've always got this expectation of if you do break through like Bacon did with I guess like some paintings like the triptych, the studies that base the crucifixion and whatnot. You've always got to try. The expectation from the critical audience and the critics and everything is that you're always going to keep on pushing that envelope, whereas that's not necessarily always possible because it takes a whole combination of things, doesn't it? Life, experiences, knowledge of art history and everything else to really do make those breakthroughs. It's like anything when they say with genius is that it's like just combining a bunch of pre-existing stuff into something that's new. But that takes a lot of will, either consciously or unconsciously, to sort of make those breakthroughs. So, yeah. I mean, like, to be honest with you, like in terms of like my art practice, I have been producing for the last few years, but not so much painting as I'd like to. Really, that's mostly as a result of not having a studio. I'm currently based in Moscow, but I don't have a studio practice. I've been drawing still, so I've still been practicing drawing, mostly sort of figurative but abstracted figures a lot recently. So I'm sort of doing a lot of drawings in preparation for eventually getting back into painting, I think. I'm hoping to potentially in a few months maybe put on a show here somewhere in Moscow. I think that'd be quite interesting, I think, doing it in a foreign country. I've never done that before. I know one space that I could probably rent out quite cheap and just put on a show of some drawings and stuff. That might be quite interesting. So in terms of my own practice, I'm sort of drawing quite a lot. Doing my own. I'm doing like a lot of. It's not like fine art per se, but I'm working on games and stuff which have got a sort of artistic bent, I suppose, or like programming projects, which it's not exactly fine art, but I'm interested in exploring how I could do projects which utilize that knowledge that I've developed and then sort of take it in an artistic or exhibition context, I suppose. I mean, we did do the tunnel. We did the virtual exhibition last year, which was quite an interesting project. I suppose that's the most artistic virtual thing I've done recently. But yeah.
Well, these drawings that you produced, I mean, these sort of preparatory work for paintings that you'll eventually produce when you get a studio.
Yeah, so often, not all the time. Sometimes it's pure exercise, but I've also been experimenting a bit more with creating drawings and then creating digital works from those drawings. I did a study of a nude recently from a photograph, and then just sort of made it into I guess a sort of Matisse-like digital image, almost in some respects. The color, in terms of the color. But yeah, I mean, I'm basically trying to keep myself in the sort of mode of creating imagery, so that when I do eventually get back to the canvas, I can have a ready source of a library or archive of imagery to draw from, I suppose. And also, you just want to keep on producing images from your head as well, because I mean, you'd never lose it, I don't think, if you've been in an artistic process for a long time. But it can certainly be harder to start making marks if you haven't done it for a while. It can get more imposing or sort of like.
But what can happen is you can lose your understanding of the material. That's what will happen. But you can relearn it quite quickly.
Yeah, it's like riding a bike, I suppose, in some ways. But yeah. And I mean, with producing fine art, a lot of it's in the doing, isn't it? Nearly all of it, really. So yeah. So yeah, hopefully I can get back to painting again soon. I'd like to. I found with painting, though, painting is one of the hardest things to really keep cracking at for a prolonged period of time, because you need a space to do the painting in. It makes quite a mess. You need the canvas to buy, which can be quite expensive if you're painting large, and the paints to buy, and the brushes and everything else. So yeah, hopefully once I've got space sorted out in Moscow, I can just get back onto doing it. But it takes a while to set up a true painting practice, I think. I don't know what you think about that, but I think sometimes to set up a proper painting practice can take a little bit of time, which can be a bit can be a lot of work, actually. It's lovely when you have it. I mean, it's lovely to have a studio space that you can just go to and work in, but it's not always that easy.
Well, with painting, you need the regular routine of working. It needs to be almost daily. I know that's not always possible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it needs to be a daily practice.
Yeah, well, something I mean, like I've been a lot more busy in my day jobs recently as well, so I find it.
Yeah.
It's always, and I don't know if this is just. I mean, I'm 35 now, so I find as I've got older, in my mid to early 20s, I was a lot more able just to spend loads of time painting and drawing and stuff. Even though I had jobs, but I mean, a few of my jobs when I was early 20s to mid 20s were like part time. Whereas now I work remote, so I work from home, but uh, pretty much conventional hours, and it's quite hard to find the time sometimes to fit it in, which is sad, really. I guess part of it's like, but you know, I'm still poor somehow, but like it's like yeah, it's I don't know. I think in some respects, maybe to if you really want to push it, being a visual artist, you have to almost sacrifice some sort of other career options. Really, it's not like I don't think many painters can be also investment bankers or I don't know whatever. Like it's not very possible.
I,
Any job where
I
there's
think
long
to be
hours.
a full-time painter, you've got to struggle. And you've got to really struggle and suffer from my own experience.
You don't have to necessarily
It's hard.
struggle. I mean, I guess a lot of
Uh,
painters who do it full time, is not full time, but like spend a lot of time on it are like teachers as well. But like for myself, that's not an option because I've not studied art at a formal level, so I can't ever go down that alley of teaching, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard one. I think a lot of artists struggle with that, like how to balance work and your passion for painting and artwork. It's very difficult because to realistically make it work as well with the supporting yourself with your artwork, you have to be selling. You have to have gallery representation. You have to be selling quite frequently. It's a really hard thing to do. I watched an interesting documentary actually where a psychologist, I can't remember his name, but he said that maybe the trade-off will have to be in the future that if you do want to keep on producing your work and having a sort of independent spirit to it, that you have to sort of have that part-time job just to get by as an artist. Because I think there is an argument that could probably be made that if you are a successful artist in sort of art market terms, that the art market sort of dictates the style of the work that's popular. So then you have to keep on churning out that thing that you've been doing for a while. Obviously, it's not true in all circumstances, but there probably is some truth to that, I guess. And maybe it's an easy thing to fall into, I suppose. Like if you have a certain thing that you do is very popular that starts selling a lot, it can be. In some ways,
well,
maybe.
then that's a trap. It just becomes another formula. That's what it becomes.
Yeah, but I mean, it must be hard to.
You never compromise your integrity as an artist. You just be true to yourself and do what you do. And if it sells, that's great. If it doesn't, well, you take that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, something I want to explore maybe a bit more in the future, and probably more of my digital projects, but it's doing like I think like you've been doing a bit as well recently, is experimenting with crowdfunding and stuff. I don't think I'll do it with painting projects, but probably with some digital thing in the future. Is to experiment with that a bit, just to sort of do groundswell of like people supporting or financially sort of contributing towards something that will be an end product, I suppose. But it's something I need to think about a lot more. I guess to change the subject a bit, in terms of my the fuller part of my practice in the artwork, I've been doing a lot more writing recently, actually. So yeah, I've been doing a lot more writing, short story writing. I've got a short story collection actually in the pipeline now, with nine or 10 different short stories. So that's quite interesting. It's been quite interesting to do more of that. Mostly sort of science fiction based stories, but with a sort of absurdist twist, I suppose. So that's something I've been. I mean, that's not really fine art. I guess it's more like literature on some level. But
Are you planning to publish them?
yeah, just self-published because short stories are very hard to push to publishers because you need to be sort of very established to really stand a chance. Novels are better basically for pitching to publishers, but I think I want to
Yeah,
self-publish. So I think I'm going to
But you can
self-publish
publish
them.
them in magazines.
Yeah, individual short stories and stuff. Yeah. Oh, you're frozen on me.
There
Lovecraft.
must be a sci-fi magazine that would publish your stories somewhere.
Yeah.
And Bukowski.
Yeah. That's something I'll probably explore a bit more, I think, in the next year or so. I have sent off to a few publications in the last year. I also submitted to an audio stories guy, and he runs a channel on YouTube, but I got a rejection from that. I mean, it's sort of similar to the art world in some respects. You've got to just keep on pushing it because you will get rejected quite a lot, I think. You've got to sort of take it on the chin and just carry on doing it, I think. And also take valid criticism. That's the same as with visual art. You've got to be able to do that. But yeah, so
And you also need self-criticism as well. That's vital.
yeah, to a degree, yeah. You don't want to be too much self-critical, but yeah, there's definitely self-awareness. It ties into self-awareness, I think, in some ways, doesn't it? Really. Okay. Is there anything else you want to ask, I suppose? Any other questions?
That's it. I think that was quite good.
Okay, cool. I'll just stop the recording then, actually, now, I guess.